Hello, internet strangers. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I also never thought the woman I married would smile while pulling my entire world apart. So here we are. Name's Merritt. Yeah, like the old highway or the cough drop brand. People always tease me about it. I'm 41, a high school history teacher in a quiet part of Wisconsin. Been married to Callista, 39, for just over 12 years. We have no kids, her choice, mostly, but I was okay with that. At least I thought I was okay with everything. Now, I'm not sure I was even awake for the last decade. Let me give you the moment everything changed. It was a Wednesday morning. Cloudy. The kind of morning where nothing feels right but you can't say why. Callista was in the kitchen, stirring her coffee like she always did, clockwise, fast, 3 times, then a sip. Routine. Predictable. So I thought. She looked up, didn't smile. Just said, flat as drywall, I want a divorce. That was it. No fight. No yelling. No tears. Just a surgical strike to the chest with a teaspoon in her hand. I've already made up my mind, Merritt, she added, folding her arms. This is what I want. She called me Merritt. Not honey or babe like she used to. Just my name, like I was her dentist or something. The words didn't sink in at first. I just nodded like I'd misheard her. I think I even smiled, awkwardly, because part of me thought this was a prank, or a weird test. But it wasn't. And when I looked at her eyes, I saw no flicker of guilt. No softness. Just distance. That distance that tells you they've already packed their heart in a box weeks ago, and you're only now seeing the tape. But here's the part she didn't know. I already knew about Sebastian. And Grant. And God help me, Vino Boy 23, which I had hoped to the depths of my soul was some ridiculous spam bot. It wasn't. You see, for months, maybe even a year, I've been feeling like I was a guest in my own marriage. I blamed myself. I work late. I'm not exactly athletic. I leave my socks near the bed. I mumble when I'm tired. You know, the kind of stuff marriage therapy blogs tell you to fix before it's too late. But Callista wasn't pulling away because of socks. It started with a single message I found by accident. Not on her phone. Not even on mine. On our tablet, which we barely used, while I was trying to stream a documentary on ancient battle tactics. Yes, I'm that guy. There it was. A sync notification. Had a dream about you again. Still can't believe we did that in your office. Smiling face with horns. The name? Darla. But I clicked. It wasn't Darla. It was Sebastian Klein, her networking friend from that wine-tasting conference in Vermont. The same man she swore up and down she found intellectually exhausting. I felt my stomach fall so fast I actually sat down on the floor. It wasn't just one message. It was hundreds. Over months. Videos. Voice notes. And not just with Sebastian. There were others. One used a cartoon profile pic and only wrote in lowercase. Another sent her Venmo payments titled, "For last Tuesday's sins." I didn't confront her. Not immediately. Because I knew this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a system. Callista had a whole second life, and I was just the guy keeping the lights on in the first one. So when she told me she wanted a divorce, I had something ready. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I reached into my hoodie pocket, pulled out a flash drive, and placed it on the table. What's that? She asked, suddenly unsure. My reply, I said. It contained screenshots, logs, video clips, usernames, and dates. I even hired a tech friend of mine to recover deleted files. The folder was called Reflections because mirrors don't lie, and neither did this. She plugged it into her laptop and opened the folder without a word. And I just sat there. I watched her face twist. First confusion. Then panic. Then something new, fear. The same woman who just told me she was done now looked like someone trying to figure out how to undo the nuclear launch code she just typed in. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just whispered, "How long have you known?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Long enough to know that I'm not the one leaving." And I walked out. You want to know what happened next? Oh, trust me. It gets so much worse before it gets better. 3 days after I walked out, just as I was starting to process what the hell had happened, someone knocked on the door of my friend Jasper's place, where I'd been crashing ever since I left. Jasper is my best friend since college, and the kind of guy who stocks 3 types of cereal but never milk. I was sitting in his cluttered living room, surrounded by unopened mail and a guitar that hadn't been tuned since Obama's first term, when that knock came. It was too polite, too controlled. You know the kind of knock where the person on the other side already assumes you'll answer? That kind. I opened the door, half expecting a delivery. Instead, It was Derek. Now, Derek is Callista's older brother. And I mean way older, pushing 50, military buzz cut. Always smelled like a mix of aftershave and wood glue. He's the kind of guy who never liked me but played nice for family photos. So when he showed up on Jasper's doorstep, holding his hat in both hands like he was about to tell me my dog died, I knew something was off. He cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk." About Callista. I didn't say anything. Just stepped aside and let him in. Jasper, thankfully, was at work. Derek sat down and immediately rubbed his forehead like someone fighting off a migraine. He didn't look angry. He looked embarrassed. "Look," he said, "I don't know what the hell's been going on, but she called our mom in tears yesterday. Said you hacked her, invaded her privacy, and then abandoned her." I laughed. Not out of amusement, but because of how fast the truth had twisted. I pulled out my phone and opened the same folder, Reflections. I played one voice memo for him. Callista giggling. He still thinks I'm at yoga. I'm literally in a robe drinking Pinot on Grant's couch. Derek stared at the screen like it had just slapped him. He listened to the whole thing. Then another. Then another. When I paused it, he leaned back and said, "She told us you were distant. Cold. Emotionally unavailable. Said she was scared of you." That one hit. Not because it was true, but because I know exactly how believable that sounds when someone's desperate to rewrite the narrative. I shook my head and replied, "Derek, I cooked for her every night. I ironed her shirts when she had early meetings." I didn't raise my voice once in 12 years. He nodded slowly, face turning red, not in anger, but shame. "I believe you," he said finally. "I've always known my sister was dramatic. But this is something else." That's when he told me something I never saw coming. "She's been talking to a lawyer behind your back for almost a year. She's been planning this. Gathering financial records, accounts, the title to the house. She wanted to hit you all at once. The clean break." I felt my chest tighten, not because of the betrayal that had already sunk in, but because I realized she hadn't just cheated on me emotionally or physically. She'd been waging war in secret. This wasn't an affair. It was a heist. And I was the mark. Derek shook his head and stood up. "I can't defend her anymore. But you need to be careful, Merritt. She's not done. She's trying to paint you as the villain. And some of the stuff she's saying, if it gets out of hand, it could hurt your career." As he left, he handed me something, a flash drive. "She asked me to hold on to this. Said if anything happened between you two, I should make sure it stayed private. But I think you need to see it." I watched him walk away down the sidewalk, shoulders hunched like he'd just helped rob a bank and now wanted to confess. I plugged the drive into Jasper's old laptop. And what I found inside wasn't just shocking, it was nuclear. It wasn't just Callista and Grant or Sebastian. It was her recordings of conversations with her attorney, her friends, and even a burner voicemail where she called herself single and seeking escape. And at the very end of the folder was a Word doc, titled, "Exit Strategy." Timestamps. Account numbers. A timeline. She was never planning to ask for a divorce. She was planning to leave with everything and blame me for the fallout. And if I hadn't sent that one text message that ruined her fantasy life, she probably would have succeeded. But now I had everything. And suddenly, the man she thought she was leaving behind? He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 days after Derek left, I got a call from an unknown number around 8:17 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was microwaving some leftover chili Jasper had made that tasted like regret and paprika. I picked up, expecting a scam call or maybe a drunk student. I've had both, but instead, I heard a quiet voice say, "Hey, it's me, Callista." I didn't say anything, just listened. She hesitated, then said, "I know you probably don't want to hear my voice right now, and you have every right to be angry, but I've been doing a lot of thinking." She talked for nearly 6 minutes straight, unprompted. I stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching the microwave rotate as she poured out a speech that sounded memorized. She said she'd lost herself, that she'd been confused, and most insultingly, that she thought I was too perfect, and that made her feel small. She framed her affairs not as betrayals but as desperate, misguided attempts to feel alive. And then came the kicker. I think I made a huge mistake. I'm not asking to come back. I just want to talk. Can we meet? I was silent for a few seconds too long, and she took that as a yes. "Tomorrow," she rushed out. "There's this wine bar we used to like, the Clover Room. I'll be there at 7. If you don't come, I'll understand." And she hung up. Jasper came in from the balcony, saw my face, and said, Was that the ghost of Christmas betrayal? I told him everything. He begged me not to go, said I didn't owe her anything. But something inside me, it wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't love, it was curiosity. I need to see what kind of person can burn your entire life to ash, and then try to walk barefoot through the mess with a smile. So I went. The Clover room was mostly empty. She was already there, in a booth by the window, wearing the same emerald green dress she wore the night we got engaged. A detail that would have crushed me a week earlier. Now it just felt staged. She smiled when she saw me, like nothing had happened. "You look good," she said. I didn't respond. Just sat down. She launched into a story about her childhood, about how her dad never made her feel valued, how she always felt like she had to prove something to every man in her life. It was the kind of carefully orchestrated vulnerability you'd expect in a courtroom or therapy session. She cried at one point, real tears, I think, but they came too early in the story, like a bad actor missing their cue. Then she said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I want to undo this. All of it. The divorce. The lies. Everything. I've already told Sebastian it's over. I blocked Grant. I'm even in therapy. I just want my husband back." I waited. Let her sit in that silence. And then I asked, "Why now?" She blinked. "What do you mean? You wanted a divorce. You were done. You were going to erase me and take the house and pretend I never existed. Why the sudden change of heart?" She reached into her purse and placed her phone on the table. "Because you knew. Because you showed me who I was. And because everyone else knows now too." That's when I realized this wasn't about guilt. It was about damage control. She wasn't apologizing because she regretted what she did. She was apologizing because I made it impossible to keep pretending. That reflections folder? It had gotten out. Somehow, maybe Derek told someone. Maybe she dropped the ball herself, but her friends knew. Her office knew. Even her mother texted her a single line that said, "You broke a good man. You'll carry that." Her entire web of lies collapsed. Not because I exposed her, but because her own arrogance did. She started crying harder, her voice catching as she said, "I don't want to be alone. I made a mistake. Merritt, please." But the thing is, she was wrong about that too. She didn't make a mistake. She made hundreds. And I've been quietly documenting every single one. I stood up, dropped a folded piece of paper on the table, my response to her sudden backpedaling, and walked out without saying a word. The paper? It wasn't a love note. It was the finalized copy of my own legal petition for divorce. Filed. Signed. Delivered. The moment I stepped out onto that sidewalk, I realized I wasn't walking away from something broken. I was walking towards something finally honest. 2 days after our encounter at the Clover room, I received an email from an address I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. It was from Rainey Wilcox, a name I hadn't spoken aloud since my 20s. Rainey wasn't just anyone. She was my ex-fiancée, the one before Callista, the one who vanished on me 2 months before our wedding without a single explanation. No note. No call. Just disappeared. The subject line of the email read, "I didn't expect to be involved in this." I opened it with trembling hands, not knowing what kind of surreal rabbit hole I was about to drop into. Her message was short, polite, cautious. She wrote, "Callista reached out to me. Said you were in a dark place. That you were telling people lies about her. I didn't believe her, but I thought you should know she's dragging me into whatever this is. I don't want trouble. I just want peace." I sat there staring at the screen, my pulse racing like I'd just run a marathon through my own past. Why would Callista reach out to her of all people? How did she even find her? It didn't take long to get an answer. That night, Callista showed up at Jasper's place. No warning. Just stood there at the door in a raincoat, holding a soggy envelope like she was returning a lost pet. Jasper opened the door but didn't let her in. I stood behind him, arms crossed, cold as stone. "Merritt, please," she said, her eyes red but her voice rehearsed. "I just need 5 minutes." Jasper looked at me. I sighed and nodded. She stepped inside and immediately started pacing, as if building up momentum for a speech. "I didn't know how else to get your attention. You wouldn't answer my messages. You blocked my number." I panicked. I cut her off. "So you contacted Rainey? My ex? Who ghosted me over a decade ago?" She flinched, but only slightly. "I didn't mean to involve her. I just thought, if someone from your past could talk to you, maybe you'd see I'm not the villain here." It was unbelievable. Not only had she destroyed what we had, now she was resurrecting the one person I'd spent years trying to forget, just to make herself look like a victim in someone else's story. I looked her dead in the eye and said, You don't get to hijack my past just because your future blew up. She started crying. Again. The same way she had at the wine bar. Only now, it didn't even move me. It felt like watching a stranger try to mimic human emotion. But then came the twist I hadn't seen coming. Callista reached into her coat and pulled out a sealed manila folder. She handed it to me and whispered, "This was supposed to be my insurance in case things got ugly. I don't want it anymore." I opened it right there. Inside were printed screenshots of my emails from over 5 years ago, taken completely out of context, heavily cropped, framed to look like I'd been flirting with a student's mother during parent-teacher meetings. It was nonsense, and I could easily prove it, but the intention was clear. She'd been ready to go scorched earth if I ever turned against her. "Did you send these to the school board?" I asked, my voice ice-cold. She shook her head. "No, I wanted to. But after seeing your file, the way you handled everything, the way you didn't destroy me when you could have, I couldn't follow through." I nodded slowly, breathing deeply to stay calm. She added, "I'm sorry, Merritt. I lost everything. My reputation. My job might be next. Grant blocked me. Sebastian's wife found out. I'm alone. I just want some part of my life back." I told her the truth then, clear and final. "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it didn't go the way you planned." She stood frozen for a second, like her brain hadn't caught up to the words yet. "I used to think you were the most strategic person I knew," I continued. "Now I see you're just reckless with better clothes." And with that, I handed the folder back to her. "Take this with you. Burn it. Frame it. Send it to whoever you want. I'm done playing this game. And I'm done being quiet." That night, I finally forwarded the Reflections folder to my lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to ruin her. But I would not let her rewrite the story. Because the truth is, some people don't come to apologize. They come to negotiate their legacy. It had been nearly a week since the last confrontation. I thought things had gone quiet, maybe finally over. Until I got an unexpected group text from an old friend named Theo, someone Callista and I had known since before we were even engaged. The message read, "Hey, a bunch of us are meeting at Evelyn's place Saturday night. Thought you should come. Callista's invited too. No drama. Just friends. Right. No drama." I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji, not committing. Jasper saw me reading the text and muttered, "Sounds like a setup." He wasn't wrong, but I went anyway. Saturday night came, and Evelyn's place was packed. String lights, soft jazz, and that weird middle-class wine and cheese energy where everyone pretends they're not gossiping. I stepped inside and saw her instantly. Callista. She was dressed to kill, confident, smiling like nothing had happened, surrounded by people who clearly hadn't heard the full story or were pretending not to know. I kept my distance, made small talk. But then Evelyn stood up and made a toast, talking about community and staying strong through changes. It was vague, but then she handed Callista the floor, literally passed her a glass of Prosecco and gestured for her to speak. What followed was a carefully constructed monologue. Callista didn't mention names, but she spoke in riddles about redemption, private mistakes, and how people can grow if others let them. She made it sound like I had been cruel, distant, and that her transgressions were just temporary lapses in judgment caused by emotional neglect. I stood still. My jaw didn't drop. I didn't storm out, because I didn't have to. Out of nowhere, Theo, quiet, kind, always awkward Theo, stood up and asked loudly, "Callista, are you going to tell everyone what you did to Merritt? Or should I?" The room went still. A cheese cube dropped off someone's plate. Callista's face paled. Theo, eyes locked on her, added, "You slept with my cousin. You tried to get Merritt fired. And now you're here pretending you're the victim." You could hear the blood drain from her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I didn't say a thing. I didn't need to. Theo sat down. People looked at her differently. The mask cracked. And for the first time, Callista realized something terrifying. Not only had she lost me, she had lost the room. After the disaster at Evelyn's gathering, Callista vanished. Social media profiles gone. Phone disconnected. Even her LinkedIn erased. It was as if she wanted to scrub herself from the digital world entirely. I figured she was hiding out, licking her wounds, maybe planning her next narrative. Either way, I didn't care. I was finally starting to feel something I hadn't felt in months, normal. That's when the box arrived. Plain cardboard. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in sharp black marker across the top. It was sitting on Jasper's porch when I got home from work. No note. No warning. Inside were old photos, a pair of earrings I once gave her for our first anniversary, a crumpled wedding program, and beneath it all, a leather journal. It wasn't mine. It was hers. I hesitated. There was a small part of me that wanted to throw it all out. Burn it, even. But curiosity can be cruel. I opened the journal. The entries started 4 years before we met, and they were nothing like I expected. Page after page revealed a woman I had never truly known. She wrote about how she never believed in monogamy, how relationships felt like domesticated prisons, how she envied her friend Julia, who had 3 different men in her life, each serving a different emotional purpose. She described men as investments, some long-term, some short-term, and some, she said, were just bridges. On one page, she wrote, "I met a man today at the conference. Merit. Sweet. Too sweet. Could be useful. He feels steady. Maybe he's the bridge I need to get to who I'll become." I stared at those lines for a long time. She didn't fall out of love. She never planned to stay. I wasn't a husband in her mind. I was a phase. I closed the journal, put it back in the box, and walked it straight to the trash. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt free. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I tossed the box into the trash and turned the final page of the Callista chapter. Life was moving again, quietly, steadily. I'd returned to teaching, took Jasper out for burgers to thank him for putting up with my collapse, and even went a full 24 hours without thinking about her. That, for me, felt like a kind of victory. But as anyone who's been through something like this will tell you, peace is a fragile thing and often temporary. Late one night, I received an email. Not from Callista. Not even from anyone I recognized. The sender's name was Juno Carlyle. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I know her." At first, I thought it was spam. But then I saw the opening sentence, "I used to date Callista in college, before she started using people the way she uses oxygen." My chest tightened. I read on. Juno explained that they had dated for almost 2 years during undergrad. Said she was the first person Callista had ever really opened up to. She called it love, though in hindsight, Juno said it felt more like being studied, tested, manipulated. According to her, Callista didn't just fall out with people, she unraveled them, piece by piece. Juno even mentioned a similar notebook, one she'd accidentally found. A different one, full of plans, lists, names, calculations. She wrote, "I wanted to warn you earlier, but I didn't know how. I only saw your name come up recently because of that post Evelyn's boyfriend made about what happened at their party. I recognized the pattern, the way she spins stories. You're not the first person she's tried to erase. But maybe you'll be the last to stay quiet." There was an attachment. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was a scanned letter. Handwritten. Definitely Callista's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to me. Or to Juno. It was addressed to herself. A diary entry. One written less than 6 months before she married me. "If I play this right, I can buy 10 stable years and walk away with the house. Merritt won't fight. He's built for silence. That's why he's perfect. That's why he won't see it coming." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I realized how close I came to losing more than my dignity. If I'd never found that first message, if I'd ignored the signs, I wouldn't have just been cheated on. I would have been erased from my own story. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since high school. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to her. Not even to Juno. To myself. I wrote everything. My mistakes. My fears. The truth I'd ignored. I wrote that I would never let someone else's manipulation define how I saw my own worth again. That I wasn't weak for believing in love. I was strong for walking away from someone who never understood it. And then I posted the letter anonymously to a forum I'd followed quietly for years. A place where men talked openly about emotional abuse without being mocked or dismissed. The post went viral within hours. People shared their stories. Thanked me for mine. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel like a fool. I felt like a survivor. But just when I thought the past had finally let go of my shadow, I received a voicemail. Blocked number. 3 seconds of silence. Then a soft voice. "You don't know the whole story yet." It wasn't Callista. It was someone else. And I knew instantly. This wasn't over. The blocked voicemail stayed on my phone like a ghost. I played it over and over, listening to those 4 words. "You don't know the whole story yet," trying to place the voice. It wasn't Callista that I knew. The tone was softer. Almost hesitant. Familiar, but not recent. I didn't have to wait long for the mystery to solve itself. The next evening, while I was grading papers in the staff lounge, a school receptionist knocked and said, "Merritt, there's someone asking for you at the front desk. Says she's your friend." I walked out and saw Naomi. Naomi Winters, Callista's former best friend. The one who moved to Colorado 3 years ago and suddenly cut contact with everyone. I hadn't spoken to her since she moved. Back then, Callista told me Naomi was too intense, toxic, and had boundary issues. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. Naomi stood awkwardly, a manila envelope clutched to her chest. "I didn't know if I should come," she said. "But you deserve the full truth." We sat on a bench outside the school, the wind picking up. She handed me the envelope and started talking. I left because Callista asked me to lie for her. Not once, over and over. About where she was, who she was with, even about you. At first I went along because I thought you two were just going through a rough patch. But then it got darker. She looked down. One night, she said something I couldn't shake. She said, "If I play this right, I'll never have to work again." That's when I cut ties. I couldn't stomach it. I opened the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots, texts Callista had sent Naomi, voice notes. One recording had Callista laughing, saying, "He's too nice to fight back. That's why it works." I didn't even feel the sting anymore. Just clarity. Naomi added, "I saw your post online. I recognized your writing. And I realized, you're not broken. You just trusted the wrong person. And that doesn't make you weak, Merritt. It makes you human." We talked for almost 2 hours. And by the end of it, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I thanked Naomi. Hugged her. And that hug didn't feel like the past. It felt like the beginning of something new. In the weeks that followed, I took a trip. By myself. Just my car, a cabin up in Door County, and a stack of books I'd been meaning to read for years. I watched the sun rise in complete silence. I cooked for myself without setting timers. I breathed. And somewhere between the third night and the fourth, something shifted. I stopped wondering where Callista was. Stopped replaying scenes in my head. Stopped imagining different outcomes. Because I realized the one I got was exactly what I needed. Freedom. I went back to teaching with a full heart. I reconnected with old friends. Not the mutual ones, my friends. The ones who remembered who I was before I tried so hard to please someone who never really saw me. And one of those friends, her name's Amelia, invited me for coffee. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a walk. And that walk, well, we'll see where it leads. I don't want to rush anything. But this time, I'm not looking for someone to rescue me or validate me. I'm just looking to share my peace. And I've finally found it.